Hello and welcome to Nat Chat. I'm Mirella Rich. Today our guest is Chris Varney, who has Asperger's and has also started the I Can Network, which is a non-for-profit organisation, and he is the founder of it. He's also got a law degree. Welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me, Mirella. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you were diagnosed with Asperger's?
Sure. So I was a very different kid, tended to think differently, move differently, and my family and my kindergarten kind of said, I wonder, how Chris processes information very differently. What could this look like? And so I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which is a mild form of autism, at the age of 5. And I really see Asperger's as an incredible strength, especially when you've got a network around you that help you channel your focus and your motivations in an area that can be really positive for you. And that's certainly what Asperger's really helped me to do. My family looked at how I moved differently and said, well, he loves telling stories, he loves writing. I loved reading fantasy epics and was someone who could remember anything about history. And I think, that early experience, having so many interests that were very different to other kids, especially at a young age. When I was aged 9, I could tell you everything about the different royal families of Europe across 5 different centuries. And what kid does that at the age of 8? So, I was fascinating like that. I was just a little professor. But that also, those strengths can come with challenges. And mine were of a social nature. My wider family probably found me, could be very distressed when there were things in my sensory environment or things that I didn't know how to take at family settings and things. And so my story was Asperger's was just part of who I was. And then when I was made aware of my diagnosis at the age of 14, I looked back on my childhood and thought, wow, I've been incredibly lucky with the people that have supported me and brought the best out of me throughout my childhood. And then in my young adulthood, when I started realising that not everyone saw Asperger's the same way, or autism spectrum more broadly, I was so frustrated with that I said, well, let's start a network that corrects people's perceptions and promotes a rethink of autism from I can't to I can, because my network had always made me think I can. And I thought, well, we need more networks like it, so let's start one big one.
Wow, so you recognised the difference between how you were brought up with it, and then what you saw how other children are being
absolutely. It was a huge, I'll never forget the moment. I was in Darwin, Northern Territory. I was very lucky to be Australia's youth ambassador to the UN and was doing youth consultations and met a girl who I will call Sarah, who introduced herself just as anyone would, and she said, I've got Asperger's syndrome, I'm on the spectrum, I guess that means there's things I can't do. And I was so struck by it because my grandma, who was such a huge influence on me, her name's Margaret, she'd given me a book when I was aged 8 called I Think I Can, because I was this kid that, there were funny little things that were difficult with me. Like took forever to do my shoelaces. I was very particular with how I looked. I had routines and patterns that were involved throughout every aspect of the day. Nothing was ever that straightforward. I would always take people through a process and people would be like, why is he taking so long with that? That's hard for Chris. I didn't think that would be hard for Chris, but telling the time or working that out, that has been difficult for him. But my grandma was terrific at finding ways for me to pick things up. And she gave me this book when I was aged 8, and herself and my wider family really brought that I Can microchip in my head. And so when I met this girl, Sarah, in Darwin and heard her say that, I was like, who else is saying this? And that sent me to about 140 schools speaking about autism spectrum and an I Can approach to it. And I kept meeting kids who told me, I don't feel understood. I wish I had more friends. The world sees me like this, but really I'm like this and I wish I could share it. And then I was meeting teachers who were like, I think they're great, but I don't know what to do. And I thought, we just need to show everyone how great this can be. And so ever since then, we started the network 2 years ago, and it's just spread like wildfire since then.
Yeah, well, it's a great attitude, isn't it? It's like, instead of seeing the negative, let's see the positive.
Let's see the positive.
See the beautiful things.
Yeah, exactly. And it is a, I mean, when I was diagnosed at the age of 5, I really like how you said that word beautiful, Mirella, because my mum was told, you know, lower your expectations of Chris, and this will be very hard for you, and you need to involve this service in your life forever. And my mum said, you know what, this can be beautiful, and I'm going to show you how. And so I think that influence really made me go, right, let's get out there and really actually say, look, the world benefits from embracing autism. And so that's what it's been about.
You must come from a very loving background.
Yeah, I do. I have, and I'm extremely lucky with my network. I was raised with parents who really saw my possibilities, and this was hard for them. You know, I wasn't an easy kid, wasn't a walk in the park. There were moments when I would have anxiety attacks and worrying episodes where, you know, my mum, I'll never forget one incident where I had this, I can't even remember what triggered, you know, a really just moment of distress for me, but I was really worried about something at school. There was some routine that I hadn't followed that didn't mean anything to anyone else, but it just meant something to me. And I think Mum was so frustrated, she grabbed my school bag, and this was when I was in year 8, and she just threw it across my bedroom and went right through the wall in my bedroom. And it was that moment of, whoa, you know, this is my level of worry has got her to this point. But I did, you know, there were moments like that. So it wasn't a walk in the park. But my parents were practiced tough love. And that meant that they could be my worst enemy at times, but really they were trying to be my best friend. And I turn around now and thank them, but parents of any kid on the spectrum are, you know, their number one ally. But what parents need are teachers who will support them and listen to them and be understanding. And they also need their friends and their parents, so grandparents, who will provide a refuge for them when they need it. So
we're about to go to a break, and we'll talk more soon. You're watching Nat Chat. Stay with us. We'll be back with more very shortly. Hello and welcome back to Nat Chat. I'm Mirella Rich. Our guest today is Chris Varney, if you've just joined us, and he has Asperger's and has started the I Can Network. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much for having me, Mirella.
It's lovely to have you here. And can you tell us what sort of efforts and what sort of work do you have to do to educate schools and universities and everyone about this? Yeah,
so I Can Network, social enterprise led by people with autism. At a really high level, we want to bring about a rethink of autism from I can't to I can. And that is about public education, and it's about bringing people with you. We are still in a world where the words mental retardation are pretty commonplace in family homes, communities and schools, and where autism is perceived as, at a meta level, as a bit of a deficit. And I think that's a real shame, because there are enormous benefits to taking a more positive approach. And so how you educate people it's really important that we listen to people with autism, that we provide platforms and opportunities for people on the spectrum to share their stories and who they are, and share their talents and bring out the awe in autism in their communities. And I think that can be really fun, because this is a spectrum, it's a spectrum of strengths, but it's also a spectrum of endless quirks. And I think the power in listening to someone's story, I mean, you can hear about anything and go, okay, autism is a spectrum of strengths. What does that look like? And you do have to break this down for people so that they can really go, okay, so it's about me enabling, not labelling. An example I share when I educate people is we have mentored a boy named Luke. Luke's 14 years old, and Luke finds it terrifying being in a big room with people. he doesn't like the idea of free time at school or at camps, and most typical kids love the concept of free time. But Luke can't engage with it because it doesn't feel natural to him. He doesn't know. Talking to someone and initiating conversation is an excruciating effort for him. But Luke knows everything about international horse racing. He's into horse racing stats. He can tell about horse racing in Japan and the UK. And when I first found out about this obsession, I laughed with him and said, hey, my dad, who I probably think is on the spectrum, knows everything about Melbourne Cup winners. And he said, oh no, I kind of write about international horse racing. I checked him out on Twitter, and this kid Luke has 11 million followers on Twitter. He contributes to a blog called Sport is Made for Betting. And he knows everything about horse racing stats. And yet when you meet him, you would go, okay, Luke's got some challenges here. He's not grabbing my hand to shake it. He's not making eye contact with me. Like, these are two immediate things you expect when you meet someone. But that doesn't come straight up with Luke, because he needs a bit of a different method for you to understand who he is. And so the education that we need to do about autism is actually starting with people's stories and ensuring that people like Luke can share who they are, and really share their talents, because we so easily judge a book by its front cover. And when you meet Luke, the typical things that you would expect are not there. But his confidence does come out. You've just got to give time and believe in him. And time and belief in someone are the most important things you can do for someone on the spectrum. And to educate people, that's what we need, that time and that belief.
Right. So just to listen to someone with autism, let them just talk.
Let them talk. Yeah. Just the best thing you can do for someone to autism is to say, okay, how can I make things easier? What can I do to change the environment? Or, who are you? And, what are you into? What are you into is a great question, because I guarantee you they will fascinate you with some of their interests. Like,
that's beautiful.
Luke was, we were mentoring him on one of our camps. He was not having a great time, found it, very awkward, the experience of being with 60 strangers. And you know what? That's pretty reasonable. Lots of people find that hard.
Fair enough.
But here he was, and I asked him, okay, who are you, Luke? What do you like doing? And there's that answer of horse racing that comes out, and you're just like, wow. And, I feel really lucky to know him.
Yeah. And do you find there's two ways of looking at that? There's one way is you can draw it out of them, which is great, and then they become confident, they feel loved, they feel listened to, so then they can just live a bit happily.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a beautiful thing. But then on the other hand, if everybody keeps drawing that same thing out and they keep bringing the same thing out, does it ever change? And even if it doesn't, is there a problem? Like, does it ever change from just being only horse racing the conversation?
Oh, absolutely.
Or does the confidence make them flower more
Make
and then
them flower
open
more.
up
Yeah.
with more things, as with anyone?
Yeah, I certainly don't want to, to continue the example of Luke, Luke's he has an enormous future ahead of him.
Yeah.
There's not many people at 14 that like meeting 60 strangers, and for a good night and a half a day he didn't like it. Yeah. But he really flowered since then.
That's what I would have thought.
Yeah,
too.
There was this breakthrough moment when he couldn't get out of the car to join the camp.
Yeah.
But at the end of the camp, he'd asked his mum, "Can you bring flowers for my mentor here, because this has been such a breakthrough moment."
Oh, that's so beautiful.
And so there's his mum who dropped him off, going, "He's screaming at me. He doesn't want to be here," and turns around 2 days later, and it's been a real moment for him.
Yeah.
And that's the power of the amazing journey and privilege you have when you make yourself involved in these people's lives, because you watch them expand themselves, and there's just nothing like that side.
Exactly. It's kind of just like the power of love as well. When you love someone, they completely change. They feel comfortable, they're free.
Transform.
It's like you give someone wings when you love them.
Exactly. And I think you really do. And we live in a world where we pigeonhole people really quickly, and we love putting labels and categories around people. Sometimes categories are helpful, but at the same time, if you look at the word disability, its technical definition, it's created by the environment. I don't own Asperger's. some people identify with autism as a disability, but I don't own autism. My autism happens when someone is watching me figure out, do I hug that person? Do I kiss them on the cheek? How do I cope with that moment? People can see, wow, Chris really doesn't know what to do. He looks a bit nervous and he's got a bit of sweat there going, how does he work that out? Yeah. But, that's when autism happens. It doesn't happen in isolation in a room. It happens when you meet someone. And that's, if we change the environment, we remove the need to distinguish.
Beautiful. About to go to a break now. You're watching Nat Chat. Stay with us. We'll be back with more very shortly. Hello, I'm Mirella Rich and welcome to Nat Chat. If you've just joined us, we're here with Chris Varney, who has Asperger's and has started and is the founder of I Can Network, and he's also a graduate in law. He's got his graduate in law. Yeah, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Mirella.
So before the break, we're talking a little bit about labelling and also about affection. So with someone with Asperger's or even autism or someone on the spectrum, how can someone, say if they're married to someone with that, how can they bring them out to be more affectionate?
Great question. I think the first thing I need to say is no two people on the spectrum are the same. My organisation, we're only 2 years old and we've mentored 231 kids and young people on the spectrum, and every single one of them brings out a different shade of autism. For some of them are actually very affectionate, overly affectionate in some ways, and will be people that, if you're someone that likes what they likes, one thing that happens is, for some people in my team who love dogs, if they meet someone walking on the street that also has a dog and they're fascinated by the dog, wanting to meet the dog, they might hug the person who's holding the leash with the dog, because they're happy to see them and they're happy that they share a common interest.
So autism doesn't mean that they can't hug and they can't be affectionate, because often you hear mums saying with their child they're
sometimes
autistic,
that's a common story, but sometimes there can also be the opposite, where there's overly affectionate. But I think what's very important to correct is some people think that people on the spectrum aren't an emotional group, and emotion and hugging or affection are obviously strongly connected, but I actually think that people on the spectrum are even more empathic, but that their timeline around that empathy looks very different. An example I would give you, speaking quite personally, is I have a very delayed reaction with grief. And I will, if someone close to me dies, and I thought, well, I've been lucky to have great people in my life, but I've also buried many of them. And, when people who've been important to me have passed away, I've tended to be the real organizer in the network of bringing, a funeral and things together. I've done that several times, and my reaction will be quite delayed. People go, wow, you're coping well. And I've actually gone, this isn't about coming across as strong. I think showing emotion is an incredibly strong and important thing. But I know a lot about myself, and one of them is that my reaction will be probably delayed 6 months down the track. An example I'd give you is my grandfather, who died when I was 16. I still tear up all the time about who he was, about him dying, because he was such an important influence in my life. And the affection thing, it does look different for everyone. I always have awkward moments knowing, do I hug that person? Do I give them a kiss on the cheek? And you can watch me and laugh with me when I'm unsure of what to do. And certainly I do fit your description of a kid on the spectrum who didn't hug mum, and that just wasn't something I wanted to do. I showed affection in different ways. And I think probably because I still don't hug mum a lot, but I talk about my mum every day, and that's just a different way of showing that love that has a different expression. So, I've learnt to become more affectionate, certainly have become more affectionate, and you, like everything on the spectrum, you've got to make it work for your structure, and you've got to break it down. And, you know, people would laugh with me because I would write things down and I'd write little strategies. I'd always have a little notebook, and if you tried to pick up that notebook and read it, you'd be like, I don't understand anything in here, because it's just me writing down, this is how I'm working myself out in the rest of the world.
A lot of things in life as well are organised. Like maybe you don't normally grow up knowing exactly how to love. You have to be taught.
You have to be taught and find your way of doing it.
Yeah, and then exactly, and like say, as far as affectionate, like even like children, this is like sometimes they're embarrassed about that. And that's kind of natural, but then they see adults do it, and then they, you know, you know, having their, you know, hello, how are you? Like I remember when I was young, I really wanted to ring up someone and go, hi, how are you? Because it seemed so formal. Because we just played together, you know? Just ran and played, and there was no formality to it.
No formality, exactly.
But just like manners and affection, like you're saying with the shaking hands and winter kiss, and also like there could be adults in romantic relationships where one of the ones has got Asperger's or autism and can't show affection to the other one. Is there a way that the other spouse can bring it out of them and slowly show them ways to be more affectionate, or can it be learnt, or is it something that once it's gone, well, it doesn't come at all?
Oh, I think certainly I've found, I've actually found working with people on the spectrum, I found them to be an incredibly adaptive group of people. When they have the motivation to do something or change something in their life, they will go after it like a ton of bricks, and there is just nothing you can do to stop them when that's in their focus. So if someone is wanting to be in a relationship, or if someone is wanting to have a family, or, you know, wanting to broaden themselves, I've certainly found that I manage 50 people on the spectrum. Some of them are contractors that I pay. Some of them are volunteers that give me an enormous amount of time. And I've found that when you set things up the right way for them, and when they've got a goal that they really are motivated around, they're an unstoppable force. I mean, for me, speaking quite personally, I wanted to have relationships in my mid-20s, and I did. I think, in fairness to, they were wonderful women, and I think they probably both found me challenging because I was such a focused individual, and I wanted to set up this network and wanted to grow it and get it ready for a whole generation of young people on the spectrum. They were fantastic people. I was so focused on that it was probably very hard to be in a relationship with me. And I think that is probably a common theme across some people on the spectrum. It's certainly not representative of everyone, but that's what happened to me.
Yeah. So, well, we've come to an end, but would you like to come on the program again?
I'd love to. Thanks,
I'd love to hear lots
it'd
more
be great. Awesome.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
You've been watching Nat Chat. I'm Mirella Rich. Hope you enjoyed the program with our guest Chris Varney. See you again soon.